Hello and welcome to another episode of That Inner Voice podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Mackenzie, the conscious living coach and owner of Lunar Spirit Wellbeing. Now, I'm excited for today's conversation, but before we go ahead and get on with the podcast, I just wanted to let you know about a free course that I have put together to soulfully kick anxiety's butt. As I'm an anxiety and mindset coach, I put together a DIY online course for you all. So I will put the link in the show notes so you can go and sign up for free and help yourself to soulfully kick anxiety's butt, because it's a real pain in the butt sometimes. But I give you lots of tips and tools how you can implement them into your life so anxiety isn't holding you back so much. So without further ado, let's get on with today's podcast. And I'm excited to have Jo Grace with us today from MindbodyWise, and we are going to be talking about the nervous system. I'm excited for this conversation because the nervous system, and I love the nervous system. It's a massive, complex bit of kit, and it's so under talked about still in many areas. And I don't think some people realize the significance of the nervous system within trauma and anxiety as well. I'm going to hand you over to Jo now. Hi, Jo. Thank you
Hello.
for.
Oh, lovely to be here. I love your work and I love your energy. So it's such a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. So, do you want to introduce yourself? Who
Yeah.
are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
I'm Grace. My company's MindbodyWise, and I also have a part of that called RegulationWise, which is the focus on the autonomic nervous system. So my background is psychotherapy. I'm a trauma psychotherapist, and in the process of me working and understanding, forever finding out ways to support clients and understand myself and my own healing, the most exciting part for me in recent years has been the development and the knowledge that we're learning more about our bodies. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's very much the more I empower my clients because most people come to therapy because they don't feel very empowered.
Yeah.
And for me, the awareness about their autonomic nervous system is the biggest, most kicking butt sort of bit of information around empowerment, in terms of this is the body you're carrying your beautiful soul around in. Mm-hmm. This is the body that you have. Most of us experience this body as a battlefield at some times, as challenging. And actually, it's this incredible piece of the most high-tech, sophisticated bit of software, really, or not software, hardware, that we can possibly imagine. And we haven't been taught how to work with and embrace and adore this body. So for me, that's where I got into nervous system health.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, it's I said this the other day on one of my courses. It's just like, we live in this body and we live with our minds every single day, but how much do we really know about them?
No.
Many people are just walking around on autopilot, taking it all for granted and have no idea how the body works and how to use it for the greater good.
Absolutely, Jen. The thing about being a human, the thing that makes us different, is that we have these incredible minds. We've got this incredible brain that can come up with the most phenomenal inventions, create solutions, etc., etc. But our mind is also where we can get completely stuck in limiting beliefs. We can get completely stuck in patterning that happen, imprints of things that happen to us. And the answer to the challenges in our mind lie in the body. And we haven't to do that sort of level of connection. There's an awful lot about if we can just change our mindset, if we just think positively, then we can make changes. And actually, if we're overriding the body's signs and signals the whole time, we can positively affirm ourselves all the way to hell and back kind of thing. But if we're not actually listening to what our body's saying, then we're not going to get anywhere. And once we start to bring body awareness with mindset, then that's where the genius happens, as you know.
Oh yes, it is. So let's dig deep into the nervous system then.
Yeah. So what I'm talking about is, because we have a few different nervous systems, but what I'm talking about primarily is the autonomic nervous system. And this is part of the periphery nervous system in our bodies. So the central nervous system is the brain and spine, and then we have the autonomic nervous system, and then we have the skeletal nervous system. And I'm talking about the autonomic nervous system, which is fundamentally our command center. So its job is to be taking in signals for the environment and helping the body to automatically breathe, digest, regulate the heart, allow the blood flow, have sexual responses, and also it holds the survival responses. So fundamentally, its job is to be our first port of call about whether or not the situation we're in is safe or not, which actually underlies being a human. We are mammals, and the most important thing is keeping ourselves safe.
Yeah.
So we're on high alert without realizing it, and we can't be tuned into that because we'd go nuts if we had to think about every time we breathed or digested a bit of food. So what's going on unconsciously 97% of the time is our autonomic nervous system going, is this dangerous? Is this dangerous? If it is, I'm going to go into fight flight to get away or fight, or if it's really dangerous, I'm going to go into a freeze. So that's all well and good. And if we were in a real life survival situation, so if we had a truck coming at us and we had to run out of the way, if we had someone come in to attack us and we had to fight them back or run away, brilliant. That's exactly what it's there for, to activate this cascade of hormones and responses so we could survive. The freeze response, if we were bleeding out, we'd had an accident and we were bleeding heavily, the freeze response comes in to shut it down so that our heart rate slows and we don't bleed as much so that we can survive for longer. So this is what it's there for. The problem is that when we had experiences from being born, and actually in utero as well, of times when we were frightened and we didn't do the whole process of the survival response in that moment, it gets stuck in our bodies. So it's a stuck energy, which then becomes a patterning, an imprint. So if you experienced misattunement, particularly between 0 and 3, if you weren't regulated with, because we're born not knowing how to regulate our bodies and our emotions, and we learn from our caregivers. So however we were regulated with, we then set up a patterning of how we are in the world. This is a massive topic, Jen, and we haven't got so I'm doing
huge, talking about how we were regulated as babies. Can I just ask something then? So would the baby be affected by the mother's fight or flight response as well?
Completely, yeah. So, and this is again,
But
this conversation can get into some really triggering in itself, because if you're a parent and you start to at all think about how you parented, you will see where you've messed up, because inevitably we're part of a traumatized culture. Okay, I was parented by parents who were brought up after the Second World War. They were parented by parents that were brought up after the First World War. This is deeply cultural. We've lived 12,000 years in the patriarchy, so as a woman in this culture, we've inherited certain ways of regulating that isn't actually a healthy way. If that makes sense. So for the baby, we're born without the capacity to regulate our own feelings and our emotions, and we learn that from our caregivers, usually the mum. And if the mum was depressed, if the mum herself had dysregulated ways of dealing with her emotional responses, if the mum was under-supported, because so many of us are in this culture, if the mum was experiencing abuse or distress in the home, then she would not have been able to attune with the baby in the way the baby really needed. And therefore, by the time we're 4 months, we've learned which emotions we can and can't do. Normal 4 months. And then that can get compounded on by other things that happen in our childhood. And because we're phenomenally clever, we will still find a way to operate. And this is when people come into therapy, usually, is where they've had a certain way of regulating themselves all their lives. So it could look like pleasing everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure I'm really pleasing for everybody else, and I do everything for everybody else. And they get to be 40, usually peri-menopause with women, actually, where the estrogen starts to go low. And they start, I've looked after everybody, and I'm exhausted, I'm frazzled, I'm depressed, I'm unfulfilled. And once we start to track it back, it goes right back to how they were regulated or dysregulated with as a kid, and how they've then operated in the world. So you talk about anxiety.
Yeah.
The three main, so everyone will probably have heard of fight, flight, and freeze.
Yeah.
And anxiety sits in the flight part of the nervous system. So it's to do with when you didn't feel powerful, you were scared,
Mm.
didn't feel powerful, and you weren't able to empower yourself during that particular time. So think about, as a kid, you don't have much autonomy, you don't have much power, you don't have choice, you can't get away, you can't do a flight response, you're stuck there.
Yeah.
And so that stuck feeling of not being able to escape starts to churn around in the mind, and the mind loves to make a story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're mean machines. We love to make meaning of everything. Yeah, and that's a big part of anxiety. Is we make everything mean everything, don't we?
Yeah. So if I work with, I mean, you've got amazing ways of working with anxiety, but from a nervous system point of view, if I have a woman who's got a lot of anxiety, which most women do, and they're in that wormhole of the anxiety, that horrible place of like round and round and round, I encourage them to get into their body when they're in that zone, and to send the body a message of, you can go away if you want, you can do a flight response. So even if you catch yourself doing a wormhole, and everyone has their own unique like spirals, at that moment, and it'll often happen 3 a.m. in bed. Yeah. And the reason for that, because at that point the body's trying to regulate itself, and so that part in the nervous system, and we wake up going, oh my god, worry, 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 worry. Now what a lot of us will do is try and go back to sleep. We can't, and actually what we're doing is we're immobilized in bed, aren't we? We're lying down. The message we're sending to our body is, you can't get away, and so that increases the anxiety. So what I would say to somebody in an anxiety mode in the middle of the night is, if you can, get up, move. I'm sure
that's my advice, is get up, or just move from that place, so you're not like this in your anxious like body and mind, just
What they're actually doing is a freeze response on the body. The body's just going, I can't move, and the brain's going, we're under threat, and the brain's wanting to fly. And in the absence of actually doing the flight movement, which is literally, even if you just get up and stand running on the spot, move on the spot, which I do some nutty things in the privacy of my own home, but moving on the spot, bringing in a strong breath. Like, okay, we can do this. I'm moving. I don't need to be. Can I do anything about it right now? No, I can't. Okay, I'm going to move my body. I'm going to move this energy. I'm going to move this energy so it releases, and I move it away from my mind. So that's part of the flight, the anxiety and the fight response.
Yeah, I love that. Just get out of your head and into your body. I use a lot of intuitive movement, and also then like the splashing water on your face as well, just snaps you out of that anxious moment. If you haven't got ice cubes, work well, but obviously if you haven't got an ice cube to hand, you know what I mean, like sucking on an ice cube or something. And I put in the group the other day as well, or one of my clients put in there, is like have like a sour candy or something, or mints. And then that just then shocks the body. It changes the mind, and it brings you back into that present moment, doesn't it?
What it's doing there is it's like kind of biohack at that point.
Not
a massive fan of biohacking on that, but when you're caught in an activated response, it's really, like you say, to have those kind of like the change of a temperature, the change of taste, smells really powerful. Of all our senses, smell is the one that's directly linked to the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's under threat at that point. So if you can even like smell, that's why I think lavender is really great. It does have soothing properties, but I think as much of that is the just change of smell for you in that moment. So anything that brings you into the here and now, because when we're having a triggered response, we're triggered back into a time that's not been processed. So we could be triggered back to early babyhood. We could be triggered back to the time when we were 5 and we were left on our own. We could be triggered back to when we were 8 and there was a divorce happening and arguments or whatever. We don't know. And we can be triggered by sight, smell, taste, etc. So anything you can do to bring you into the real here and now is amazing. All those techniques.
So, well, you said you're not a fan of biohacking, but I like to get people to really acknowledge what they feel, rather than just trying to avoid it or run away from it, but just acknowledge. So let the anxiety in, let it in and feel all of it, acknowledge that you're feeling it, and then let it go. So why could you explain why you're not that keen on biohacking? And
So because, so I've made one of those very general statements, haven't I? I've got to explain.
I'm interested. Yeah.
So for me, because I work with people that usually have a lot of trauma, so this is a lot of, this will have started in early years where they will have been misattuned with badly, neglected.
Okay. Yeah.
They then may have experienced abuse in their childhood. They may then well have experienced, because if we've already got those patternings, we tend to then end up in situations that re-traumatize us as well.
Yes.
And for the lot of my clients, and this is where, depending on who you're working with, and I know you're really intuitive, so I'm sure you're intuitively working with clients. Not everybody's got the capacity in the here and now yet to go to those traumatizing memories in however they do that. And so I work very much in this the long game, where I give people the tools of connecting to body, a lot of the stuff you'll be doing, you know. So a big thing is orienting in the here and now, checking, looking around, giving body the signs of safety, meeting your basic needs, like, am I thirsty? Like, most of us walk around not even knowing, are we thirsty, hungry, do we need the loo, are we cold, are we warm, are we tired, are we bored? You know, all those really basic body signals, we've overridden them for years and years and years. We've overridden them since we were babies, when we were too hot and our clothes weren't taken off, we were too cold, or we were taking places we didn't want to go, we weren't allowed to rest, we did, you know, all those things. So we've overridden our basic signals. So if somebody hasn't even got the capacity to know, am I hungry? Am I tired? What's actually going on in my body? Then I don't want to go in there too quickly and get them to talk about what's going on underneath it all. Which I'd see the biohack is where it's where it's seen as like, just do some deep breathing and you'll be okay, or just do a load of cold showers and you'll be okay. They have their place. They are amazing tools, but they can't be done in isolation, away from the bigger picture of building daily safety in your body, building daily connection to your body.
Okay. 100% agree. Yes. Yeah. I'm glad to explain that, because I 100% agree. Like, we're on the same page with that. Absolutely. Yes. So you've covered like the trauma responses, but a lot of people are unaware that of some of their traumas. So we know some of our traumas because they're quite obvious events. But there's all those traumas that we're actually unaware of.
Yeah.
Like you touched on that a bit, like when we're in the womb, and our generations before that, all the generational trauma that's passed down to us through our DNA and our genetics. Which then, like, this then is a whole nother subject of like epigenetics that you can get into, which is like so interesting. This is what I do in my spare time. Is I get lost down rabbit holes.
Me too.
Of the internet, listening to stuff on YouTube or listening to audio books all about the mind, the body, and what it does. You see, I'm like, the excitement is unreal. So when I first started studying anatomy and physiology in 2002, I went to this thing called Body Worlds. And it's the German guy who does plasticizes the real bodies. Have you seen him? I think he does the postmortems as live postmortems and that.
Yes, you mean, yes, go on, yeah.
I can't remember his name now, but it was the exhibition in London. And to actually see the nervous system, if in the real nervous system, on its own, was absolutely phenomenal. And if guys and girls and everything in between, if you haven't seen what the nervous system looks like, go and have a look on the internet or wherever, and have a look how complex and how big and how many little vessels that you have of your nervous system. Go and have a look.
I actually did a post yesterday, which is my most popular ever post. Who'd have known? And I posted a picture, and I can share it with you, of the vagus nerve.
Yes.
So So the nerve, I work with something called the polyvagal theory, and this has only been in existence since '94. It's still not mainstream taught in medical world. I have a GP client, and she says this isn't, when we talk about the nervous system, she says that when she did dissections and she got to like the nervous system in the gut, which is so vital, she asked her tutor and said, what's this? And he, oh, it's not important. And it's like, oh my God. So this is, I know. So this is still really, really early. Although so the guy that created the polyvagal theory is someone called Stephen Porges, and that was '94. And so the polyvagal is a theory of how the autonomic nervous system is working, and it consists of this vagus nerve, which is this. So you want to now, everybody listening, just put your hand behind your head. The vagus nerve comes from the brain, and it comes down the back of the neck, and it goes into two strands. And poly means many. So the polyvagal is about the vagus nerve, which is two strands, and then the sympathetic nerve, which goes down the back, which is the fight-flight zone. So the first part of the vagus nerve comes to the face, and it comes from the brain, and it innervates all the muscles in the face and the ears and the throat and the heart. And this is the part that makes us a mammal. This is the part that makes us want to go towards another. It's called the safe and social zone, and it's unique in mammals. And this is the part that we need others to do. We actually regulate each other. So right now, you and I will be doing some beautiful co-regulation because we're really interested in each other. I can see from your facial expressions that you're liking what I'm saying. We're connecting. So all the nerves here are just going like crazy. Ooh. So this is called the ventral vagal. And then we have another one, part of the vagus nerve, which goes down all the way down the back to everything under the diaphragm. So it goes to the digestion, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's called the dorsal vagal. And when that's online, so you have the dorsal at the bottom, you then have the sympathetic, which is in the sort of chest zone here, which is the fight-flight part. And the top here, which is the vagal, for the vagal ventral. When that's all ventral vagal, when that's all online, you've got rest and digest in the bottom. So you can go into deep peace and chill, and you can digest. You have action and purpose going on in the sympathetic, and then you have safe and social connection in the ventral vagal here. As soon as we get any threat coming in our system, and threat is different for everybody, because if you've got the unprocessed trauma memories, threat could be a big guy with a beard, because it reminds your body of a big guy with a beard who hurt when you were little. Or it could be a dog that bit you. So every time you see a dog, your body goes into threat. So every time we go into threat, we knock off the ventral vagal. So we can't do this connection. And we then go into these different systems in the body of either fight, flight, or freeze, which is the bottom part of the guts. So this turns up in chronic, this is where you're talking about the trauma, Jen. Chronic experience of trauma over time, if you're not aware of it on an emotion level, it might appear in your physical illness. So if you've spent a lot of time being in the fight-flight zone, which is a very exhausting zone to be in, but if you're in this zone a lot without getting regulation by being with safe others, or finding that regulation for yourself, you might get migraines, you might have high blood pressure, you might have heart palpitations, you might have back problems. They're all signs of too much action in the sympathetic zone, fight, flight. If you then go into a shutdown a lot, a functional freeze, which loads of us do, women particularly, and the functional freeze is fascinating because it's essentially where we've learned to circumnavigate the sympathetic action bit and look like we're engaged and we're okay, but we're not, and it affects how we digest. So if you have IBS, if you have fibromyalgia, autoimmune diseases, diabetes type 2 actually, chronic fatigue, those kind of symptoms physically, it's a sign that you've been in a functional freeze a lot and that your body hasn't been regulating itself. And these can come from early year trauma experiences where we weren't regulated healthily. We didn't learn how to do that. So we started to dysregulate in a certain way that then has a chronic impact on us over time. Does that make sense?
This is why, like, skin on skin contact is so important, isn't it? Like for newborns.
Yes, oxytocin.
And
an interesting, when this was a massive, when I learned about this response, so another response is called the fawning response. Have you heard of that one? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I did mention it earlier, but I'm not sure if you heard. You said fight, flight, or freeze, and I said and fawn.
And fawn, yeah. Well, there's also fit in as well. So there's two in that zone. And the fawning response is where I've just mentioned it there, where we have the ventral and the dorsal of the polyvagal connected. So the face looking like, oh, we're okay. This is the people pleasing part. I'm okay. But we've circumnavigated the sympathetic, where all the energy is. That's where all our passion, fire is really. And women do this because so remembering this was all created in our bodies when we lived in tribes. This is all to do with us living as a group together in real life survival situations. So the imperative for a woman in that situation would be get to safety as soon as possible so I can breastfeed. So we came up with this. So it's safer for us to appease, so to fawn, and not because that means we can get away from the threat. Maybe it's another tribe coming in, or maybe it's, I don't know, the bear or whatever. But or our angry menfolk or whatever, we can then get ourselves to safety, so we can produce oxytocin quickly, so we can breastfeed our young, because that's our job in that zone. So it turns up in day to day, in this life now, where we're not living in those survival situations, but we still have this very strong biological imperative to go into appeasement for safety, rather than like fight or flight. And that way.
Yeah, that's really an interesting one as well, is that people say fight, flight, or freeze, but then fawn is also really important to learn about as well. And you also mentioned fit in.
Yeah. Fitting in is a similar response, but it's where you're still the ventral and the dorsal, and you've not got access so much to the sympathetic, but you're more invisible. So it's the kind of being in a social setting, but you're camouflaged in some way. So you're still turning up, you still look like you're kind of okay, but you'd be the quiet one at the party, or you'd be the quiet one. So your system is turning up in its most tiny way, so you're not a threat to others, because you're fundamentally operating in a belief that you're going to get hurt. You still have to go to school, and you still have to go to work, and you still have to turn up. And it's again one of those ones that can be really easily overlooked. Oh, she's so lovely, she's so easy, she's so those kind of and often a lot of men do the fitting in, actually. They can turn up, but they're not actually really that present. And have learned that they can't do anger, and they're not allowed to do their feelings, so they've learned to shut that part off too. And the thing about the nervous system is, if you think about the polyvagal theory, talks about it as a ladder. It's not that simplistic. I wish it was. It's much more complex and nuanced, but it's a nice way to look at it. So if you think about the dorsal at the bottom, which feeds all the gut below the diaphragm, the next stage on the ladder is the sympathetic, and then the next stage is the top bit. And we're aiming to be in full regulation with all those systems online. So it's like a ladder. If we get into a freeze response, so we've been people pleasing all day, and we've been out, we've perhaps been at work, or we've been, at a party, and we've been people pleasing and running ourselves ragged in that way. We get home and we're so exhausted because we haven't had access to energy from the sympathetic. We go collapse down into the dorsal. This is a really common experience with lots and lots of people. They're out in the world, they're in their adaptation, their trauma adaptation. They go back home and they slump down the dorsal. And then they go to bed, and whilst they're in bed, their body's going, time to regulate. Let's move up the ladder. And it gets to the sympathetic part. And they go into a panic attack, or they can't sleep, or they wake at 2 a.m. with the racing thoughts. And once you start to understand, my nervous system's trying to regulate and move itself, incorporate all the parts of it, not just, be in the bottom and the top only, and not this middle bit. You realise that part there, the panic attack feeling, the anxiety thoughts, it's the body just processing what it hasn't been able to do in the day because
it's been too busy doing other stuff. Yeah. That makes absolute sense. That's why I have a night routine. Like I have a morning ritual and a nighttime ritual, so that I know, for me, I have to spend lots of time by myself. Or at least like some in the morning and some in the evening, because if I don't do my routine and I'm get thrown into the day too quickly, I'm just like, and I'm literally like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I haven't had
for you, Jen. Do you go into you go into like a functional freeze then if you don't do that sort of supporting rituals?
Yeah, I would say that is my go-to would be like a functional freeze, because
Yeah.
I'll be still functioning, but I won't really remember
Yeah.
most of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that autopilot, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
you just like rabbit in headlights, like
Yeah.
yeah. And then by the end of the day, my shoulders are like this.
Yes.
I'm like that by the end of the day. So yeah, then I have to do my exercises, movement,
Yeah.
and then I do my deep breathing practice,
Yeah.
my meditation, and my energy healing.
Yeah. Amazing.
And then I sleep fine.
Yeah.
Where I've been in still in a lot of the trauma that I hadn't dealt with at the time, I would get that, would literally like in the middle of the night wake up and be like, I couldn't breathe, or wake up in the morning and go, it's the day, and
Yeah.
like, I'll do it all again.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
dread
Oh, I know.
in the morning, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's an interesting, because we naturally, in a healthy nervous system that's regulated, and hello, who's that person? I think we get there, but I don't think I've never met anybody that can do this without a lot of, some sort of support, like in some way or the other. We naturally wake up with an adrenaline spike, because that's part of our healthy sympathetic system that get up and go. And if we've got a lot of unprocessed trauma patterning, we associate that adrenaline with fear. We associate it with the fight. So instead of being able to go, oh, great, I've got a boost of energy, our body, mind again makes a story of, I've had a spike of adrenaline. What have I got to worry about? And then we start to, and when I realised that I woke up every morning in anxiety, every morning worrying, and then realised it wasn't real, I didn't have to worry about those things. What it was the adrenaline and my body naturally kicking in to get me up and going. So then I started to very consciously, the first thing I do before I get out of bed is to do a deep gratitude practice of literally, I love my bed. My bed is warm. I love my kids. Oh, I am so, I literally do that.
I do that. I do. When I get into bed at night, I'm like, oh, thank you for this day. Oh, my bed. I love you, bed. Pillow. I love you, pillow. If people could actually see what goes on in these rituals and the things that I do and how I talk to myself through the day, they'd probably think I'm a bit cray-cray.
Well, I know this is it. I just all about everything, because I know that by talking aloud, I'm shifting energy. So I do a lot of ranting in my car. I do lots of venting, because it's really healthy to vent rather than do it at a person at the traffic lights who's just annoyed you. It's like I vent like mad. I talk consistently to myself, like, I love you. Oh, you've done so well. Because self-care, self-love, which is one of those, again, the sort of toxic positivity thing of just love yourself. That is really difficult if you're in a triggered fight, flight, freeze, fawning response. You don't have access to the part of your brain where you find love. Love, the feeling of love is really in this prefrontal cortex. And when we don't have, if we were not attuned with in a unconditional loving way. So there's a brilliant statement by a trauma therapist that says the mother exists in every prefrontal cell of the brain. 29 billion cells in the prefrontal cortex. Is a third of the cells in the brain, but they're super plastic, which means they can change. So if you have inner critical thoughts like you're not good enough, or you're too much, you're not good enough, that's a classic kind of one. Those are thoughts that were brought in from the outside. That's not you. You're perfect. But changing those thoughts is really difficult if you're in an activated state a lot of the time, because you don't have access to that part of the brain. So the first step is like the soothing self, the bringing yourself into regulation. However you do that, I'm hugging myself. I do this a lot. Moving energy, and then it's
about that this morning. My post this morning was about hugging and touching yourself, and that feeling of safety.
So, and creating this for a lot of people, if their bodies have been a war zone, if they've been hurt, if their bodies, or if they're ill, their bodies aren't a place they want to be a lot of the time, and learning just to be able to touch your body. This is a nice safe hold, the hand under your right hand under your left armpit and the left hand on top. So you just, this body containment. And even if you can just start doing this for yourself, it might feel horrible at first because you're getting to know yourself. But this is all part of the self-love, which allows the brain to start seeing you as as something lovable, as a being that's lovable. Because if you didn't experience that, your brain's then adapted to this sense of, I'm not experiencing love, therefore I'm not lovable, which isn't true. And then this is, so a big motivation in terms of a nervous system regulation really is being then able to access the top of your brain, where you can go, wow, I'm capable of everything. When we're genius when we're up here, but we have to allow the body to get up there.
Yes, exactly. But that's the beauty of neuroplasticity, that those limiting beliefs, those things that we think about ourselves that aren't true, that we've collected over the years, we can actually change those. And that
we really can. And the key to that is regulating the body first, because you can't do the neuroplastic change if the body isn't regulated. And this is where the positive affirmations without the body work won't work.
Yeah, exactly. You're just kind of wasting your breath, really. That's why they're more powerful when you're in a regulated state. So you get into meditation, hypnosis, when we're doing the Reiki, when we're doing the sound healing, and then you're saying the affirmations whilst you're in that state.
Absolutely. Yeah. And breath work is so powerful because of all the autonomic systems. So if you think about so breath and digestion, sexual responses and survival responses, they're largely autonomic completely. But breath is one that we can really control, which is why we can make deep changes with breath. And there's a lot of focus on down regulating, which is like calming down with the breath, which is really important because that's part of our regulatory response, definitely. But there's not so much focus on up regulation, which is a lot of we have to learn how to be in this sympathetic zone without feeling completely anxious and terrified. So using breath to upregulate, so bringing energy in, and then you move towards a down regulation afterwards. But that's how we can use breath. I think you do that in your work, don't you? So it's bringing in, so the circular breathing is an upregulation. It's activating the sympathetic zone in a safe way, and you're building that sensation in your body. Because a lot of people find that really overwhelming. When they first do, I do a lot of the Wim Hof type breath, and I do a lot of breath. And when I first started processing a lot of my trauma, it was so overwhelming because I was going into the sympathetic zone, and of course then all my memory, the feelings of every time I was frightened were coming up. But because I did it in a safe way and did it slowly, I could just slowly okay, it's okay. And that, just something to say there as well. I think a lot of people sometimes, so trauma is stuck. So trauma essentially isn't what happened to you necessarily, it's what didn't happen. So it's the bit that when you weren't allowed to fulfill the survival response. So in nature, if an animal's chased, there's quite a few videos on YouTube, a wolf chasing a rabbit. The rabbit first of all goes into flight, runs away, the wolf catches it, so it goes into freeze. This is all involuntary because predators don't usually like dead prey. So it acts dead, the wolf shakes it about, drops it because it thinks it's dead, and then the rabbit comes out of that freeze response, shakes like mad to get rid of all the adrenaline, and then it's completely fine. That's how you're supposed to process a survival response. We don't do that because we've been conditioned that it's not okay. So the only mammals that don't complete their survival responses healthily are humans and animals in captivity. And so because we learned really early on, shush, you're all right.
Yes.
We weren't allowed to fully go, or we weren't allowed, I'll give you something to be, that was a good one in my house, was like, I'll give you something to be upset about, like shut up, that kind of like shut. All these responses that kids are brilliant. I've got 2 children, and I luckily knew about this stuff because I was a play therapist before. So I was able to be alongside them and allow them just to finish their responses when they were really little. And when you're with kids, they are amazing at just screaming it out, shaking it, and then they're back into full regulation. We're completely traumatized, going, what the hell's happened? Because we're not used to it. But that's what kids are designed to do. So I can't remember what I was saying there, but so when you start to process your trauma, it is really important to have the empathic witness, because that's what we needed as little ones. We needed the safe adult going, I've got you, I see you, I understand you, I'm here. That's what our systems need. And if we didn't have that empathic witnessing, that's where therapists and coaches are really powerful, because we can do that piece for people when they're having their trauma release. And telling the story, if you've got memories of the story, is really important, because you need that witnessing. But you don't always know the story. This is what you were saying earlier, if it was early years. And sometimes telling the story can be re-traumatizing. So just for people to know that sometimes trauma release can be bursting into tears and not knowing why. Sometimes it can be a load of heat coming up.
That was me yesterday. I did have a massive release yesterday, because on Wednesday I had funny voice. Wednesday I had a 90-minute deep tissue massage. And then always after a massage, I've been doing loads of healing at the minute. I do it every day anyway, like my Reiki, my breathing, my shaking, my moving, intuitive movement, unlocking all that, my hips and everything. But yesterday, I was tired because I had the massage. It always gives me a big release. I always feel tired the next day. And then I just had loads of stuff to shed. I was just like, just let it out, let it out. And then a really good sleep last night. And this morning, I woke up this morning like, let's have it.
Yeah. You're in your that's proper action purpose, isn't it? That's the zone of when we're using that. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
But you see, previously, I wouldn't, many moons ago, I wouldn't have understood what was happening to me. I would have been questioning, why am I crying? My life's amazing, but why am I crying? And I would have tried to stop that.
Yeah.
Or started shaming myself.
Yeah.
Thinking that I don't have any right to be crying right now.
But just in that little process there, Jen, I'm hearing all the messages that we're putting in you. You've got no, should be shame is all about staying connected to caregivers. That's what the role in the tribe. If you broke the tribe rules when we lived in survival situations, you put the tribe at risk. So shame is a biological imperative to keep us connected to those tribes. The problem is now we live in tribes where there's weird rules. We've all got these, like each family system has weird rules, like, don't cry, don't feel, don't be a child, don't grow up, all the different rules that come in, and getting to know those rules and realizing. So when you feel ashamed, I love that now with clients, because I can go, that's a sign that you're in one of your like imprints, one of your conditioning. Let's work to release it. They're really powerful. So
so I felt very unheard as no, I was told to quieten down. I was too much, too hyper, too loud, too touchy, too this, too that, too much. I was too much.
And how amazing that you've been able to, because that's obviously your gift, is your amazing embodiment. Like, your energy is really beautiful, and you're here to embody that purpose to support others. And I imagine that's been a painful journey for you to shed the don't be seen and the don't be loud and
especially because I was actually like bullied at school because I wanted to act and sing and dance. By the way, I cannot sing in tune. I still do it anyway. So, and then I was like ridiculed by the other girls in the class. So whenever I did gymnastics displays, whether I was doing drama, they would be sniggering at me. So it made me stop wanting to be. No, it wasn't safe for me to be seen and heard. I couldn't be me. And then that stopped me. But like I'd love to be like on TV doing this sort of work, like on stage. I'm doing a public speaking thing, and the first one in a couple of years that's actually face to face again, getting back into it. But I already know that I'm going to be nervous, but I know that nerves and excitement feel the same.
And you're not going to
kind of like regulate that now and just like I'm just going to push past that here, do it anyway. But it's so interesting how these things that happen affect us, like, now. And I still get those triggers sometimes.
And I think I've accepted, particularly with this early year misattunement and trauma, then it's present. I mean, what you're talking about is you manage yourself beautifully. You've accepted, and I have as well. It's like on a daily basis, this isn't just seeing my therapist once a week and expecting it all to happen then. It's this is the like finding self-responsibility. So finding enough capacity, and you might have to work with a coach or a therapist for a while to do that, to be able to go every day. I need to go, I love my bed. I can feel this body. I can move this body. I can take care. I can meet my basic needs. And accepting that I've got deep unconscious messages in my system that I may never understand. And I know how to deal with them, and I can check out, am I actually safe now? Yes, I am. This is archaic. This is not of the here and now. It's been triggered by something, but I'm actually okay, and I know what to do.
And that comes with daily, consistent practice. And it doesn't just happen overnight, does it? It's like you got to be committed.
Yeah, that's the biohacking bit I was talking about, actually, because I think that's a bit where people start thinking, oh, if I just do a bit of deep breathing, it'll be okay. Yes, as well as the daily commitment to yourself. It's like committing yourself to the baby part of you all over again. You're reparenting yourself.
Wow.
You're giving yourself what you would give to the person you love most in the world, because that's who you
be. I love that. I could talk to you for ages.
I know. I've got to go and get my little boy from school. So.
I really could. So thank you so much for that beautiful insight into the nervous system. And I just love your work and what you do. So thank you for coming. And so I always ask my guests these 3 questions. As this is that Inner Voice podcast, what does your inner voice say to you, Jo? So
the inner voice that I choose to listen to now says to me that I am limitless. And I'm not just, I'm part of everything. I am you. I am the air around me. I am, everything. I'm part of it all. And I believe that deeply in my soul part. And I have to work daily with the parts of me that don't believe in that, who want to damp that down.
I just got goosebumps. That's such an amazing message. And the second question is, what are you most excited about right now?
I'm really excited about my work moving into a zone of sharing this with more people, because I've worked for years just one-to-one and then small groups, and I'm expanding my work into that. My big dream is that everybody can be regulated, because imagine a world where we're all healthy, regulated and in connection.
Wow.
In the future generations. And so I'm excited about the fact that this work is getting out there. More and more people are understanding it. There's more access to it. It's actually the most accessible thing we can do, because it's free for most of the early steps of this. You will need support without a doubt, and you need your tribe. You need to find your safe tribe. But all of us can start listening to, do I need to drink, eat, rest? If we just all start doing that, go out in nature, sing, even if we can't sing, moving energy. So a lot of this is so empowering, because everybody can do it. Everyone's got this body.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I'm excited about the work generally just expanding into the world.
Love that. Yes. And me too. Me too. Get this out there.
Yeah. And people like you seeing the different ways, because there's so many different ways to deliver the message, because there's so many different people, and we all need to.
Yeah. But fundamentally, it's the same goal. It doesn't matter how you get there, because you might find that my way, what I do, might not work for you, and then vice versa.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Self-healing is all about navigating your own way and finding things that really work for you. Yes.
And finding your tribe. So you've created your own tribe. So the people that are in your group, Jen, are your tribe. That's you, because there's something in the way you connect and you heal that is resonant for them. There'll be something in your story that's the same for everybody in your group, and that's what's really important.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's not everybody's cup of tea, but that's fine. Energy, and you attract the energy that you're supposed to attract, I think. And people will get something out of each person that they go to.
They will, yeah, definitely.
And the third question is, what is the best bit of advice you've ever been given by somebody else?
So what comes in is, and I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something about being curious. So it's being curious and kind. And I think if I was to that's me fundamentally, is like I'm so like hungry for information, and I'm always curious about, even if I've been hurt or even if there's something's really difficult, if I can find the curiosity about what happened, then I've moved into that part of the brain. Actually, I know that if I've got into curiosity, so finding curiosity in everything that I do, like curious energy, because curiosity doesn't have an edge, it doesn't have judgment, it doesn't have bitterness, it's just like, wow. So be curious and be kind and practice yourself. My granny said that.
So thank you so much, Jo. And where can people find you if they'd like to know more about what you do and the nervous system?
Yeah, so currently the best way is on Facebook under Jo Grace.
Okay.
I've got a website that's going to be launched in mid-June, but it's under construction because it's got all the new things that I've got going on. So yeah, but
Exciting. All right. Thank you so much, Jo.
yeah, thank you, lovely.
And do catch up on the next episode of That Inner Voice with me, Jennifer Mackenzie. Thank you. That's all for now. Bye-bye. That was another episode of That Inner Voice. Do join me next time on the next episode. Bye for now.